Hi everyone. I've decided today that I'm going to take a deep dive into my workshop, show you how I do everything, why I do what I do, and how you can achieve some of the same results with limited amount of tools and a little bit of know-how and a little bit of savvy. So this is my circular saw crosscut jig. I built it myself and it's got some pretty cool features and we're going to really get into it today. So my saw sits on this crosscut jig. These are just aluminium frame right here, but what I've done is I've put some plastic trunking down, you know, the kind that you use for cables, installing your TVs and stuff like that. Got that plastic trunking down there, and that allows the saw to slide just that little bit easier and to have less friction. So this fence is sitting at 90 degrees to this fence. What I actually did, rather than trying to get this and this lined up, I just got them roughly lined up and then made a cut, measured the cut with a digital protractor, which is not this. This is a, what is this? This is a combination square. Measured my angle with a digital protractor until it was a perfect 90. I could adjust it one way. If it wasn't, I could adjust it the other way. 89.5, you adjust. 90.1, you adjust until you get 90.0. So, having done that, now I'm confident that if I take a workpiece, put it up against my fence, when I run my saw, that's giving me a pretty good 90-degree angle right there. Okay, I know that I can cut at 90 degrees. That's good, but it gets better. Let's say, for example, I need workpieces of 1 foot in length. So I can bring this, which is just a clamping square. I've got some nuts and bolts to raise it up off the workbench surface so that the sawdust doesn't build up underneath it. I get my quick grip clamp and clamp it down just so that I've locked my position down, and then I can come around with my much stronger G clamp or C clamp, depending on who's telling you about the clamp, and really lock it down so that that's not going to move anywhere at all. Got a lot of clamping force down on there. What I can do now is slide my workpiece right up onto that mark, and then when I run my saw, and now I'm confident that all of my workpieces are going to be exactly the same length. So I can make repeatable cuts all day long, and that's really, really cool. That way I get to batch out my processes, and I could even decide, because I'm running my circular saw, I could even decide that I'm going to run 2 workpieces of these 2x2s at a time. In they go. I want to bring them up. I'm going to square off my edges because I actually do have need of 1-inch workpiece. I'm going to square off my edges. Put those away. Slide it up to my stop block. Right there with the stop block, and I make my cut. We're experiencing a little bit of kickback and getting bogged down, but you can still see the results are pretty impressive. Flush there and flush there. That's pretty good. And of course, I know that they're still exactly the same length with all of these workpieces. So if you're building tables, building stools, whatever it is, you know that all of your workpieces are going to be of exactly the same length. That's good. Now, I want to cut some half-lap joints. Now, how am I going to do that? Half-lap joints are really quite cool joints. They allow you to square up your work. They can be self-squaring if they're properly done. And you know that if they're properly done, that the whole project is going to fit together perfectly and everything is going to be square. So what I've done is that for any particular project, I use a combination of 2 circular saws. I'll get one of them set up so that I can cut my workpieces to length, and the second one I set up so that I can cut my joints. So now I want to cut a half-lap joint in this workpiece. It is worth always noting that if you're using this system with a traditional circular saw, it's a really good idea to pin back the blade guard, because if you don't, when you pull your saw back, your blade guard is going to catch on your work surface and become dangerous. But because your blade is actually underneath your rails, it's quite safe to use it in this way. So now I'm going to bring my blade up so that my cut depth is reduced. And now I'm going to line up my workpiece and I'm going to make a cut. So as you can see, I've taken roughly half of the material off, and if I make several passes, I'm beginning to get something that looks a little bit like a half-lap joint. So now I've made my cuts, chiseled off, and then I can turn my saw into what the Essential Craftsman, yes, shout out the Essential Craftsman, calls a Polish plane. And now I have that kind of look, right? So, if I wanted to join, let's say I want to join this with this, I'm just going to make a line there, just say, okay, that's where I want my half-lap joint to start, right? So now what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to cut these 2 half-lap joints at the same time. So I'm going to line up my workpiece here, and so now what I'm going to do, I can break off those, and I can break off these, right? But push these aside. So now what I can do real quick, turn my saw once again into a Polish plane. And there we have it. Not shabby, not bad. But let's make another attempt at one of these half-lap joints. So I'm going to bring my workpiece up, and I will show you a better way of measuring this out. But let's do this way for now. So always better to scribe than it is to actually measure. So I don't want to be saying, oh, what's the thickness of this workpiece? You know, I measure the thickness of this workpiece, and then having measured the thickness of this workpiece, I want to transfer it here. That's just long. Bang, bang. Scribe it that way. Over it comes. Line it up with your mark. Bring your saw back. Run it. Here we go. So out it comes. Out here with the chisel. Now. So that's a little bit better, and I'm sure we'll get better results as we continue. So, we got this going on. This is looking pretty good. So now, here's a thought. How about if I want to make loads and loads and loads of these half-lap joints, all kind of the same? Here's how to do it. So, I get a workpiece, measure off this way, and then I make my little mark. That's good, right? I'm going to release my stop block because I'm going to use it to measure the boundary of my half-lap joint. So what happens? I bring my workpiece, I line it up with my saw, with the mark, and then I'm going to put my stop block just to the right, that distance. So now, when I clamp my stop block down with my positional clamp, and then come over and clamp it a lot harder with my twisty C-clamp. And by the way, you can probably see those grooves under. That's just to allow the sawdust to not build up. So now I can repeat these half laps, 2 at a time. Here we go. So, break off those wafers. Look yummy, like biscuits. No, not really. Just kidding. Don't eat them. Not to be taken into the mouth. So now I've got these half laps. So, and this will be repeatable. Any work pieces that I bring up to the mark, I'm going to get exactly the same results, when I run the saw. How's about that? Pretty good. But it gets better still. What if I want to cut my half lap, rather than at the end of the workpiece, I want to cut it in the middle of the workpiece. Here we go. Here's how to do it. So I'm going to take off my stop blocks once again. Right? Take off my stop blocks once again. And let me put these workpieces away and get some brand new workpieces to demonstrate this with. I'm going to use these two. Okay. So I put them here. Let's say I want them at a length of 17 inches. So here we go. Got the 1 clamp. Got the 2 clamp. Clamp it down, clamp it down, clamp it down. So the first thing I'm going to do now, remember, I've got 2 circular saws. Both of my saws happen to be exactly the same make, model, and all of that. So I've got one of them. Now I've got this locked in that it's the perfect blade depth to cut those half laps. I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to grab my other saw. So here I've got my stop block set up now. My stop block is sitting at, what is it, roughly 17 inches? Doesn't really matter because it's repeatable. Whether it's 17 inches, 17.1, 17.398, 762.543, whatever it is, they're going to be the same. So I'm going to square off my edges right now. I'm going to pin back my blade. I've squared off my edges. And now I'm going to cut my work pieces to that length. So now I'm going to slide up again and I'm going to cut my work piece. Okay, so now I've got my work pieces. They're the same length. There we are. So now what I'm going to do, I want to cut a half lap somewhere in the middle of it. So I'm going to take off my stop block and move it. Now, here's where the magic really starts. So this is a stop block that I've made. It's different from the other one. This one I've got just a little piece of one of my steel rulers that I've cut off, and I'll show you exactly what that does in a second. So I've got my work pieces cut to length, right? I want to make my joint somewhere, for the sake of what it is, somewhere here. It only matters a little. A rough guide will do, because obviously you're gonna take your measurements. So now I'm gonna put away my cutting saw and bring back my joining saw. And I know I've been a little bit loose in the labeling because that one says cut and that one says join, but this one I'm using to join and that one I'm using to cut. Do the math, work it out, it'll be fun. Okay, So, kerf, K-E-R-F. That's one of the most important words in woodworking. What is a kerf? A kerf is the thickness of the blade. So when I run my blade, and I'm just going to run it through the middle of this joint where I want to make it now. That gap there, that's the kerf of my blade. And it just so happens to be pretty much the same thickness that I can fit this particular blade into that gap nice and snug. What that means is that this is roughly the same thickness as my blade. How does that affect my outcome? Okay, so let's say I want to join this piece to this piece at this position. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my workpiece where I want the joint to start, and then I'm going to put my stop block down, and I'm going to clamp it. 1, and I'm going to clamp it 2, right? So now that has set one of the shoulders of my joint. And now I'm going to put this right here, and then I'm going to get my other, is this right? Okay, here we go, this way. I'm going to get my other stop block, and I'm going to slide it over here, right? So I'm going to clamp this first, like this, with my quick clamp, and then I'm going to use my much stronger C-clamp to really lock it down. Now, first of all, when I remove this, then the travel between here and here well, that's the thickness of my cut. But if you look at it, you might see that it runs wide, and that's where the kerf maker comes in. So all I need to do now, when I drop this down, I have now subtracted the thickness of the blade from the width of the joint, and therefore, perfectly fitted joint coming up. So here we go. Take these bits out. There's a knot at this particular point, so this is going to be a little bit tricky, but let's get all these bits out. Oh, come on. So there's a knot there, which is a little bit annoying, but this is just for you to have an idea. So now, not bad for a first attempt. Et voila, there's your joint. Pretty good, can be better, can be a little bit tighter, but that's not bad at all. And that's the basic principle. Yeah, so you're always trying to get that. So let's make one more attempt. I don't even need to check where the shoulders are now because I know that my measurements are exactly the same. So here we are, and I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to return it to the Polish plane. So that's a lot tighter. By the time I put some glue on that, that's not going anywhere for a very, very long time. And look at that, practically perfect in every way. So that's how to get the best results out of your circular saw. Put it on a crosscut jig and then use movable stop blocks with a kerf maker to get your best possible result. Let's do one last one, and then that will be it for my deep dive of my workshop. With this, you can build practically anything that you want. With this, we build stools, we build tables, and with this, we built jigsaw chess. One last time. Oh, I didn't drop my kerf maker down. So when you do that, you must always remember, so with that, your joint is that little bit wider, but once you push this down, you've removed the thickness of the blade from the width of the joint. That should give you a really tight fit. So here we go. And I return it for the Polish plane. So that's me pushing it out as far as it will go. And there you have it. That's the result. So if you're trying to learn how to make half-lap joints, cross-lap joints, then this tutorial I hope has been useful. If you're making stools or tables using this method, what you'll find is that you can align your joints so that when you bring another workpiece, they're going to be perfectly square. So you know that your joints are going to be at the right height, and the left-hand workpiece and the right-hand workpiece, your joints are going to be at exactly the same position, and they're going to be self-squaring. Thank you very much for joining me. If you've got any questions, drop them down in the comments, and give the channel a like, a thumbs up, subscription even. Thanks very much. See you on the next one. Peace.